It was a cold morning when a quiet girl named Lena walked through the tall gates of her new school. She held her bag close to her chest, trying not to draw attention. The school looked big and beautiful, with wide hallways and shiny floors that echoed with laughter and the sound of shoes tapping. Everyone seemed to know everyone. They laughed in small groups, shared jokes, and carried instruments that looked expensive. Lena walked past them quietly, her shoes old, her uniform a little loose and her eyes fixed on the ground. This was her first day at the prestigious Maplewood Music Academy, a school known for producing young stars, students who later filled concert halls around the world. Lena wasn't from that world. Her father had worked long hours to save enough for her to study here, even with the help of a scholarship. She didn't come from a rich family. She came from a small town where people played music not for fame, but to keep their hearts warm when times were hard. She found her classroom and took a seat in the back row. The room smelled of polished wood and ink. A grand piano stood in one corner, shining under the morning light like a treasure. Lena's eyes kept going back to it. The piano reminded her of home, of her father's voice humming softly while she played beside him. She wanted to go near it just to touch the keys once, but she didn't dare. When the teacher walked in, the room fell silent. "Good morning, class," he said. "We have a new student joining us today. Everyone, please welcome Lena." A few students looked at her briefly and nodded without much interest. A tall girl with perfect hair and bright clothes whispered something to her friends and they giggled. Lena gave a shy smile and lowered her head, pretending not to notice. The teacher began the lesson, talking about the upcoming annual concert where the best students would get a chance to perform, before a panel of musicians and donors. The words annual concert made Lena's heart beat faster. She wanted to be part of it so badly, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. Here, talent wasn't the only thing that mattered. Connections did too. At lunchtime, Lena went to the music hall. It was mostly empty except for a few students practicing. She sat quietly in a corner, unwrapping her sandwich and listened to the soft sounds of the piano. The girl from earlier, the one who had giggled, was playing. Her name was Clara. Everyone admired her. She played beautifully, though a bit dramatically, and each time she finished, her friends clapped loudly. When she noticed Lena sitting alone, she smirked. "Hey you," she called out, "you play anything?" Lena looked up, unsure if she should answer. "A little piano," she said softly. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Really, this piano?" she said, gesturing toward the shiny grand instrument beside her. "Sorry, but this one's kind of ours. Only performance students get to use it." Her friends laughed quietly. Lena felt her cheeks burn. "It's okay," she said quickly. "I was just watching." "Good," Clara replied, turning back to her music sheets with a grin. Lena stayed for a while, pretending to take notes while watching Clara play. Every note reminded her of home and the way her father used to close his eyes when he listened. He always told her, "Music isn't about showing off, it's about sharing what's inside your heart." She missed that. Later that day, when most students had left, Lena returned to the hall. The piano stood there alone, under the soft glow of the evening light. Her heart pounded as she walked toward it. She looked around, no one was there. Carefully, she lifted the cover off the keys and pressed one. The sound was pure, soft, and deep. Her fingers trembled as she played another note, then another, and soon her hands moved as if they remembered on their own. The melody that came out wasn't perfect, but it was full of feeling, gentle, sad, and full of warmth. She played a tune her father had taught her, one they used to play every evening after dinner. She could almost hear his voice humming along, but before she could finish, someone's laughter echoed through the hall. Lena froze. It was Clara and her friends. They must have returned to get something. "Oh, look," Clara said loudly. "The new girl thinks she can play our piano." Lena stood up quickly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean what?" "To touch it?" Another girl interrupted, smirking. "This isn't some street piano, you know." Clara crossed her arms. "Yeah, don't let a nobody play our piano," she said, repeating the words with a fake smile that made her friends burst into laughter. Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to explain that music wasn't about who you were or how much money you had, but her words stayed locked inside. She simply nodded, closed the piano lid carefully, and walked away, her eyes stinging with tears. When she got outside, the wind felt cold against her cheeks. She sat on a bench near the school gate, waiting for her father to pick her up. She didn't want him to see her upset, so she kept practicing her smile and her reflection on the bus stop glass. A few minutes later, her father's old car pulled up. He waved from inside, smiling widely like he always did when he saw her. "How was your first day?" he asked as she got in. "It was good," Lena said, forcing cheer into her voice. "Everyone's really talented." "That's great," he said, nodding. "Remember, you belong there just as much as anyone else. You have a gift, Lena, don't hide it." She looked out the window, trying to believe him. The city lights passed by, blurred by the tears she didn't want him to see. At home, the small apartment smelled like fresh bread. Her father had baked something for her as a surprise. The piano in the corner looked old and worn, a few keys slightly off tune, but it was still beautiful. She ran her fingers across the keys absent-mindedly, thinking about the big, shiny piano at school. Her father noticed her silence. "Something on your mind?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "They said I shouldn't touch the piano at school, that it's only for certain students." He smiled sadly. "There will always be people who think music belongs to them," he said. "But music belongs to those who love it, not those who guard it." Lena looked at him, his face calm but tired. He worked long shifts at the repair shop, fixing instruments for others. She had seen the calluses on his hands, the small scars from years of work. Yet whenever he talked about music, his voice softened and his eyes glowed with something strong and beautiful. He sat beside her and played a few soft notes, the same melody she had played earlier at school. "See," he said, smiling. "Doesn't matter what piano you play. What matters is who's playing it." They played together for a while, their music filling the small room. There was no audience, no applause, but the moment felt right. That night, as she lay in bed, Lena couldn't sleep. The words, "Don't let a nobody play our piano," kept echoing in her mind. She turned on her side and stared at the shadows on the wall. Her father's quiet breathing from the next room reminded her of why she was doing all this. To make him proud. To make their struggles mean something. She whispered to herself, "One day they'll know who I am. Not because of money, but because of music." The next morning, she woke up early. Before leaving for school, she stood by the piano again, touching the keys softly. "I'll try again," she promised under her breath. "I won't let them make me feel small." At school, she kept to herself, focusing on her lessons. She listened carefully to the teacher's instructions, memorizing every note, every rhythm. When the teacher asked questions, she answered softly but with confidence. Slowly, some students began to notice that she wasn't just another quiet girl. She understood music deeply, even if she didn't show off. Still, Clara and her friends kept their distance, often whispering when she walked by. But Lena had learned to let their laughter pass like wind. Every break, she returned to the hall, not to play but to watch and learn. She studied the way fingers moved across keys, the timing, the emotion. She believed her moment would come soon, even if she didn't know when. Little did she know. That moment would arrive faster than she expected, and when it did, it wouldn't be just her who surprised them all, but someone they never imagined would walk through those doors. The next few weeks passed slowly for Lena. Every morning she walked into school with her books pressed against her chest and a quiet smile on her face. She was careful not to attract attention, but she couldn't avoid the way some students still looked at her. They didn't say much out loud anymore, but the whispers continued. She had learned to live with them, like background noise she had to ignore to keep going. Despite everything, she still loved being there. Each classroom had a piano, and music echoed through the halls like sunshine spilling into every corner. She sat through lessons, taking notes, listening closely to the teacher's words. Sometimes, when he played short examples to explain a piece, she watched every movement of his hands as if memorizing them. One afternoon, the teacher made an announcement that caused everyone to sit up straight. The annual concert was approaching, the most important event of the year. Students would perform in front of guests, families, and even famous musicians who visited the academy each year. The teacher smiled as he spoke. "This time," he said, "we're going to include a special group performance. It will feature a few pianists working together to create something truly beautiful. I'll be selecting who joins in the coming days." Whispers filled the room instantly. Everyone wanted to be part of it. It wasn't just an ordinary performance, it was the one everyone remembered. Clara's eyes lit up. "It'll be me for sure," she whispered proudly to her friends. Lena stayed quiet but felt her heartbeat quicken. She wanted to be part of it more than anything, not for fame or recognition, but to show that she belonged here too. Over the next few days, the teacher observed every student carefully. He listened to them play, corrected their mistakes, and asked a few to stay after class for short rehearsals. Lena noticed he hadn't called her once. Still, she practiced every evening at home. Her father encouraged her gently, sitting nearby with a small notebook, sometimes tapping rhythm on his leg as she played. "Don't worry about being chosen," he told her one night. "Just play because you love it." "I know," she said quietly, though deep down she wanted it badly. "But I still hope I get a chance." At school, the rehearsals began. The students chosen for the group performance were excited. Clara, of course, was one of them. They practiced together after classes in the big hall, laughing and teasing each other between songs. Lena sometimes stayed back just to watch. The teacher allowed her to observe since she always stayed out of the way. One afternoon, the teacher had to leave early for a meeting. He turned to the group and said, "You all can keep practicing, I'll be back shortly. Make sure someone volunteers to play the backup piano part." The students looked at one another. "I'm not doing it," one boy said. "That part's boring." Another shrugged. "Me neither." Clara crossed her arms. "We don't need a backup anyway." From where she sat quietly at the corner, Lena hesitated, then spoke up. "I can do it if you want." All eyes turned toward her. For a second, no one said anything. Then Clara smiled, a sharp, amused smile. "You?" she said. "You want to play backup for us?" Lena nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just until the teacher comes back." Clara exchanged glances with her friends, who giggled softly. "Sure," she said finally. "Let's see what you've got." Lena stood up and walked toward the piano. Her hands felt cold, but she took a deep breath and sat down. She knew the piece. They had played it many times in class. She placed her fingers on the keys and waited for Clara to start counting. "Ready?" Clara said, smiling faintly. "Let's begin." They started playing. At first it went well. Lena's timing matched perfectly, her notes soft and smooth. But halfway through, one of the other students deliberately changed the tempo slightly, and Clara didn't stop him. Lena hesitated for a fraction of a second, unsure whether to follow. The moment broke the rhythm. Clara stopped playing dramatically and sighed. "Oh no, that's not right," she said loudly. "You're off tempo." "I thought," Lena began, but Clara cut her off. "Maybe you should just watch, okay? This is kind of advanced for beginners." Laughter rippled across the room. Lena's face turned red. "I'm sorry," she said softly, standing up. As she turned to walk away, Clara added with a smirk, "Hey, next time you want to play the piano, maybe find one that's not too expensive to break." The others laughed again. One of them said the words that stuck in Lena's heart for days. "Don't let a nobody play our piano." The teacher returned a few minutes later and asked how it went. No one said anything. Lena had already left. The hall, her eyes full of tears she refused to let fall until she was alone. She found a quiet place behind the auditorium, where the air smelled of fresh grass and dust. She sat on the steps holding her notebook, and finally let herself cry. It wasn't just the laughter that hurt. It was the feeling of being invisible. Like her dreams didn't matter just because she wasn't one of them. She wanted to tell her father, but she knew he'd worry. He'd already done so much for her. He had sold his favorite old instrument to pay for her first term at the academy. That night, when she got home, she smiled as she walked through the door as if nothing had happened. Her father was in the kitchen fixing something to eat. "How was practice today?" he asked cheerfully. "It was fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Just normal practice." He nodded, though he noticed something different in her tone. "You sure?" She looked down at her plate and said softly, "I just feel like I don't belong there sometimes." He sat beside her. "When I was your age," he said, "I felt the same. I played at places where everyone thought I didn't fit in. But you know what helped me?" She looked up. "What?" He smiled. "I stopped trying to belong. I just played. The music found its own way to make me belong." Lena nodded. though she still felt a sting in her chest. After dinner, she went to the piano and began to play. Her father stood by the door listening quietly. Even though the keys were slightly off tune, the melody was soft and full of meaning. She didn't realize he was smiling proudly behind her. The next day at school, the teacher called the students again for another rehearsal. But this time, one of the regular pianists didn't show up. The teacher looked around and said, "We need someone to fill in temporarily. Any volunteers?" No one answered. Lena hesitated, remembering what happened the day before. But something inside her whispered to try again. She slowly raised her hand. The teacher looked surprised but nodded. "All right, Lena, let's see what you can do." The room grew quiet. Clara looked annoyed but said nothing. Lena sat at the piano again. Her fingers trembled for a moment, but she remembered her father's words. Just play. When the music started, she closed her eyes and focused on the rhythm. This time she didn't listen to the laughter or the whispers. Her fingers moved like they had a voice of their own. The melody came alive, soft and clear, with emotion that couldn't be faked. When she finished, the room stayed silent for a few seconds. Even Clara didn't know what to say. The teacher smiled. "Beautiful," he said. "I didn't know you played with such feeling." Lena gave a shy smile. "Thank you," she whispered. After the teacher left the room, Clara rolled her eyes. "You got lucky," she muttered. "Don't get too confident." Lena didn't reply. She just packed her books and left. But deep down, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. That evening, she told her father about it. He listened with a big smile and said, "See? You don't need them to believe in you first. You just keep believing in yourself." For the first time since joining the school, she laughed freely. It wasn't about showing off anymore. It was about finding her own way, one note at a time. The next morning, when she arrived at school, something unusual happened. The teacher called her to the office. "Lena," he said, "tomorrow there will be an open rehearsal for visitors. I'd like you to play one of the solo pieces during the warm-up session. It's not part of the main show yet, but I believe you can handle it." Her eyes widened. "Me?" He nodded kindly. "Yes, you. I've been watching how much heart you put into every note. That's what real music is." Lena left the office, her heart racing. She couldn't wait to tell her father. But she didn't know that the next day, during that open rehearsal, her life would take an unexpected turn. Because when her father walked through the doors of that grand hall, everything and everyone would fall silent. The next morning felt different for Lena. She woke up earlier than usual, even before the alarm rang. Her heart was light, but her mind was restless. The teacher had chosen her to play during the open rehearsal that day, and though it wasn't the main concert yet, it meant everything to her. It was her first real chance to show what she could do, to prove that she deserved to be there. Her father was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. He looked up when she walked in. "You're up early," he said, smiling softly. "I couldn't sleep," Lena replied, smiling back. "Today's a big day." He nodded, setting his cup down. "I know. I'm proud of you already, you know that?" She smiled but felt a little nervous. "You don't have to come today," she said quickly. "It's just a rehearsal, not the real concert." Her father tilted his head. "Maybe, but rehearsals matter too. I'd like to see you play if that's all right." Lena hesitated. She wanted him there, but a part of her worried how others would react. The memory of Clara's words, "Don't let a nobody play our piano," still echoed faintly in her mind. But she nodded anyway. "All right," she said. "I'd like that." He smiled, proud and gentle. "Then I'll be there." When she arrived at school, the auditorium was already buzzing with energy. Students were tuning their instruments, teachers moved around giving instructions, and a few guests had begun to take seats quietly in the back rows. The large piano on stage gleamed under the soft lights, and Lena's stomach tightened with nerves just looking at it. She stood near the curtain, clutching her notebook, watching the others go before her. Clara and her group performed their piece beautifully, their movements confident and polished. The small audience applauded politely. When Clara passed by Lena after her turn, she smiled thinly. "Don't be too nervous," she said in a tone that didn't sound comforting at all. "They don't expect much from a warm-up act anyway." Lena just nodded, refusing to let the words sink in. When it was her turn, the teacher called her name. "Let's welcome Lena," he said kindly. "She'll be performing a short piano solo before we continue." She walked onto the stage slowly, her palms slightly sweaty, her heart beating so loud she could almost hear it. The lights felt too bright. She sat down carefully, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, everything felt still, the audience, the whispers, the world itself. Then she began to play. The first few notes came out soft and uncertain, but then the melody grew stronger. It was the same piece she used to play at home with her father, the one filled with quiet sadness and hope. The music flowed like a story, one of hard work, love, and small dreams that refused to die. Her fingers moved effortlessly, each note filled with emotion. As she played, the teacher smiled from the side of the stage, quietly impressed. The few guests in the hall stopped whispering and turned their full attention to her. Something in her music drew them in. It wasn't about technique. It was about heart, and then halfway through the piece, something happened that no one expected. The doors at the back of the hall opened quietly. A man walked in, Lena's father. He was wearing his simple brown jacket, holding his old cap in his hands. His eyes searched the room until they found her. When he saw his daughter on stage, his expression softened with pride. Some students noticed him and whispered. His clothes looked old compared to the polished uniforms and fine coats of others in the audience. A few of Clara's friends exchanged looks and smiled faintly, but they didn't say anything. Lena didn't see him at first. She was too focused on the piano, but when she finally lifted her eyes for a brief moment, she saw him standing at the back, smiling proudly. A warm rush of comfort filled her chest. Her hands stopped shaking. Her music grew stronger, bolder. When the final note faded into silence, the hall remained still for a few seconds. Then came soft applause, quiet at first, then growing louder. The teacher nodded approvingly. "Well done, Lena," he said warmly. She smiled shyly, stood up, and gave a small bow. Her eyes went back to the back of the hall, but her father wasn't standing there anymore. For a moment, she thought she had imagined him. She walked off stage, and as she stepped into the hallway, she saw him waiting near the door. "You were amazing," he said proudly. "Dad," she said, surprised but happy. "I thought you weren't going to come inside." He chuckled. "I couldn't just stay outside. You were too good to miss." She laughed softly, relieved. "Thank you. I was so nervous." "You didn't look it," he said, patting her shoulder. "You looked like you belonged up there." As they spoke, Clara and her friends walked by. One of them whispered, "Is that her dad?" Loud enough for everyone to hear. Clara didn't stop her friend. Instead, she gave a small smile and said, "Oh, I didn't know her father worked here." Lena turned toward her. "He doesn't," she said politely, though her cheeks grew warm. Clara smiled wider. "Oh, I just assumed," she said with a fake sweetness before walking away. Her father, sensing her discomfort, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry about them," he said quietly. "People talk when they don't understand." Lena nodded, trying to shake off the embarrassment. The teacher came over then, smiling kindly. "Your father, I presume?" he asked, extending a hand. "Yes," her father said, shaking it warmly. "Thank you for giving her this opportunity." "She earned it," the teacher said sincerely. "You must be very proud." "I am," he said with a quiet laugh. "She's always had music in her heart. I just helped her find it." The teacher smiled, clearly touched. "Well, she has real talent. You should hear her play in the next rehearsal. I'd like her to join the main group performance." Lena's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," the teacher said. "You've earned it." Her father's eyes filled with pride. "That's wonderful news," he said. "Thank you, sir." When they left the auditorium, the sun was setting. The golden light spilled through the windows, painting the floor in soft colors. Lena walked beside her father, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "I can't believe he said that," she whispered, still smiling. "He wants me in the main group." Her father nodded. "I knew it would happen. Hard work never hides for long." They stopped near the gate. Her father looked at her, serious now. "You know, Lena," he said quietly, "when you play, I hear more than music. I hear everything you've been through, the patience, the hurt, the courage. That's what makes you different." She smiled, blinking back tears. "You taught me that," she said. He shook his head. "Maybe. But you're the one who kept believing when it was hard." The next day, news spread quickly that Lena had been added to the main group performance. Some students were surprised, others jealous. Clara pretended to be happy for her but couldn't hide the tightness in her smile. She just got lucky, Clara told her friends later. The teacher probably felt sorry for her. But when Lena walked by, she greeted them kindly anyway. She didn't need to prove anything through words. Her music would do that soon enough. That afternoon, as the group gathered for their first full rehearsal, the teacher asked everyone to prepare for a surprise session later in the week. "We'll have some visitors joining us," he said. "I want you all to be ready," the students murmured curiously. No one knew what he meant. When rehearsal ended, Lena found her father waiting for her outside again. He was carrying a small worn-out music notebook, the one they used to share at home. "I thought you might need this," he said, handing it to her. "It's got that old song we used to play. Maybe it'll bring you luck." She smiled, hugging the notebook. "Thank you. I'll keep it with me." As they stood there talking, the teacher walked by and smiled at them. "We'll be doing a special rehearsal on Friday," he said. "Parents can attend if they like." Her father nodded. "Then I'll be there." Neither of them realized then how important that day would be. Because on that Friday, when the doors opened and Lena's father walked into that grand hall full of students and teachers, everything would change. For once, there would be no laughter, no mocking whispers, no fake smiles, only silence. The kind that comes when everyone finally sees the truth they had been blind to all along. And that silence would speak louder than any applause ever could. When Lena sat down at the piano that evening, her hands trembled slightly. The same students who once laughed at her were now standing quietly near the doorway. No one said a word. The sound of the air conditioner was the only noise in the room. Her father stood a few steps away, his warm eyes watching her like he used to when she was a little girl learning her first tune. "Go ahead," he said softly, with a kind smile that gave her courage. Her fingers touched the keys and a gentle note filled the room. It started uncertain, but she didn't stop. She took a deep breath and began again, this time letting her feelings lead the way. Slowly the music grew stronger, fuller, and alive. It wasn't just sound, it was emotion flowing through her fingers, like every memory she carried was finding its place in the melody. Her father watched her play, nodding slightly with the rhythm. He didn't say a word, but his presence gave her peace. His hand tapped lightly against his side, keeping time like an invisible metronome. The sound of the piano grew softer, then rose again, swelling through the hall like a story told without words. At first, the students just stood there, but soon their expressions changed. The same people who once mocked her for even touching the piano were now completely still, eyes fixed on her. Clara, the one who had always been the loudest, was standing with her arms crossed, but the confidence she usually carried wasn't there anymore. She looked almost ashamed. The teacher had paused his work at his desk. He turned his chair to face them and didn't move either. The sound of Lena's playing filled the entire space. It was pure and unforced, like she wasn't performing for anyone. She was simply remembering. Halfway through the song, her father began humming softly along. His voice wasn't strong anymore, but it had depth and warmth. It wrapped around the piano's melody like a second layer of life. The two of them, father and daughter, were lost in the music, not thinking of who was watching or what had been said before. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. There was no mockery, no shame, no comparisons, only sound. A sound that came from the heart of a man who had lost part of his hearing, and a girl who had carried his love for music quietly all her life. As the final part of the piece came, Lena closed her eyes. She remembered all those nights at home when the lights flickered, and her father still managed to teach her one more song before bed. She remembered him guiding her small hands over the keys, saying, "Don't force the music. Feel it. Let it come from inside." That's exactly what she did now. She played from inside. The room was no longer just a rehearsal hall. It was a place where everything changed. The last note faded softly into silence. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment, then dropped slowly into her lap. She didn't look up right away. She was breathing hard, not because she was tired, but because she had given every piece of her heart to that performance. Then came silence. A deep, full silence that no one dared to break. the kind of silence that carries respect. Her father wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand, though he tried to hide it. Lena turned toward him, and he smiled proudly, the kind of smile that said everything words couldn't. Finally, the teacher spoke. His voice was soft, almost uncertain. "That was beautiful," he said. "Truly beautiful." Lena looked at him, unsure of what to say. She wasn't used to praise. Clara took a small step forward. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. I didn't know you could play like that." Lena looked down, giving a small, nervous smile. "I never got the chance to show anyone," she said gently. No one else spoke for a long time. Some of the students were still standing with their arms crossed, but their eyes were softer now. Others just stared at the piano like they were trying to understand what had just happened. The teacher stood up and walked over to her father. "Sir," he said politely, "you must have been a wonderful teacher." Her father chuckled, shaking his head. "I used to teach," he said, "a long time ago. But after I lost part of my hearing, I stopped. I thought I'd never play again. Then Lena started learning on her own. I guess she found the sound I lost." That single sentence seemed to touch everyone in the room. Clara lowered her gaze completely. She remembered how she had told Lena not to touch their piano. Now it felt foolish, painfully foolish. The teacher nodded slowly, clearly moved. "She's remarkable," he said. Her father looked at Lena, his eyes shining with quiet pride. "She's stronger than I ever was." Lena bit her lip, her eyes wet. She wanted to say something, but no words came. She simply hugged her father tightly. He patted her back gently, smiling. "See?" he whispered. "You didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The music always tells the truth." Later that evening, after everyone left, the teacher asked Lena if she would perform at the concert. She hesitated for a moment, remembering how nervous she had been before. But then she looked at her father and nodded. "I will," the teacher smiled. "Good, this time everyone will know who you are." Word spread quickly around the school. The next morning, when Lena entered the classroom, no one laughed. Some smiled politely. Others gave her space, unsure what to say. Clara approached her quietly during lunch. "Hey," she said, her voice small. "About what I said before. I'm sorry." Lena looked at her for a second, then nodded kindly. "It's okay," she said. "Let's just forget it." But Clara shook her head. "No, you were amazing. I wish I could play like that." Lena smiled, shyly but warmly. "You can. You just have to play for yourself, not for others." Clara didn't answer, but she smiled too. It wasn't fake this time. It was real. As the concert day drew near, Lena practiced every evening. Her father came to the hall whenever he could, sitting in the same chair by the piano, sometimes tapping along or humming the melody under his breath. She didn't need him to correct her. Just having him there made her play better. The students often passed by and stopped to listen quietly. Even those who had mocked her before seemed to respect her now. They didn't interrupt or whisper anymore. Some even helped her carry her sheet music after practice. It was a small change, but it meant everything. The night before the concert, Lena sat beside her father on the old park bench near their small apartment. The cool evening breeze carried the faint sound of traffic and laughter from far away. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think they'll like it?" she asked softly. He smiled. "They already do," he said. "But remember, that's not the point. You play because it's who you are. Whether they clap or not doesn't change that." She nodded, letting his words sink in. He always knew how to calm her heart. When the concert day finally arrived, Lena stood backstage waiting for her turn. She could hear the applause from the audience for the other performers. Her hands were shaking again, just like before, but this time it wasn't fear. It was excitement. Her father was sitting in the front row, watching with that same gentle smile. When she caught his eye, he nodded once. That was all she needed. She took a deep breath and walked toward the piano under the bright lights. As she sat down, the noise in the hall faded into silence. Then she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play, the same piece she had played that night when her father stood beside her. Every note carried a piece of her story, her pain, her love, her memories. And as she played, the room filled again with that same feeling of quiet wonder. By the time the last note faded, everyone was on their feet. The applause was loud and endless, but Lena didn't look at the crowd. She looked only at her father. He was clapping softly, tears shining in his eyes. For her, that was enough. The day of the concert arrived quietly, but for Lena, it felt enormous. She woke up before the sun, her heart full of excitement and nerves at the same time. She dressed carefully, making sure her uniform was neat and her shoes polished. Her father, as usual, was already awake, quietly preparing her breakfast and smiling warmly when she entered the kitchen. "You ready?" he asked softly. "I think so," Lena replied, though she wasn't sure if she really meant it. Her stomach fluttered like it had a life of its own. "You'll do great," he said. "Just play the way you always do. Let the music speak." She smiled at him, feeling courage rise in her chest. His words always had that effect. When they arrived at the auditorium, the place was buzzing with energy. Students were preparing, parents were finding seats, and the lights cast a soft glow over the polished wooden stage. Lena's piano gleamed under the spotlights, and for a moment she couldn't believe she was about to play in front of all these people. Backstage, she could hear Clara and her friends chatting nervously. This time their laughter wasn't cruel. It was the kind that comes from excitement. Lena felt a little surprised at the change. Some of them even offered small smiles when they noticed her. She nodded politely, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Her father found a seat in the front row, just like he promised. He gave her a small wave and a reassuring smile. Lena took a deep breath and focused on the keys before her. When her turn finally came, the applause for the previous performers faded, and the hall fell silent. Lena sat down at the piano, her hands hovering over the keys. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes and thought of all the nights she had practiced at home, her father's gentle guidance beside her, and the small apartment where music had always been a refuge. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost like a whisper, but soon the melody grew, sweeping through the hall with a richness that surprised even her. Every chord carried a piece of her story. Quiet struggles, late nights of practice, the sting of mockery, and the warmth of her father's encouragement. The music was alive, breathing in the space, touching everyone who listened. Her father leaned forward slightly, listening, his eyes glistening. He wasn't clapping yet, he didn't need to. Just seeing her play like this was more than enough. In the audience, some of the students who had once laughed at her sat frozen. Clara was there too, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale and quiet. For the first time, she saw Lena not as the quiet girl or the nobody, but as a musician. A real one, whose talent came from heart and dedication, not money or appearances. The music carried Lena through the entire piece. She closed her eyes at times, letting her fingers move as they had learned to, without thinking, without fear. It was more than performance, it was honesty. Every note told a story. Every chord echoed the struggles she had faced. When she reached the final note, she let it linger, holding her hands above the keys for a second, feeling the sound fade into the silence of the hall. Then she lowered her hands and sat quietly, her chest heaving slightly. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence wasn't awkward, it was awe. People weren't sure if they were allowed to break it. Then the hall erupted in applause, loud, full, and heartfelt. Parents cheered, teachers clapped, and some students wiped tears from their eyes. The kind of applause that comes not just from talent, but from truth. Lena turned toward the audience. Her eyes found her father first. He was standing now, clapping slowly at first, tears rolling down his cheeks. His proud smile was brighter than any spotlight. The sight filled her chest with warmth, and for the first time she felt completely seen. She rose from the piano and took a small bow. The applause continued, echoing around the hall like a wave. Her heart raced, but not from nerves. This was joy, pure and unfiltered. After the performance, the teacher came over, beaming. "That was extraordinary, Lena. Absolutely extraordinary," he said. "I've never seen a student play with such feeling. You didn't just perform, you told a story." Lena smiled, shy but happy. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. Clara approached next, her usual confident posture gone. I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I never should have said those things before." Lena shook her head. "It's okay," she said gently. "I understand, I just wanted to play." Clara looked at her, eyes wide, and nodded slowly. "You're amazing," she said simply. Her father came over then, taking her hand. "See," he said softly. "You didn't need anyone to believe in you first." The music spoke for itself. They walked together out of the auditorium after the concert. The air outside was cool. and the city lights reflected in the puddles on the ground from a light drizzle earlier. People were still talking excitedly about the performance they had just witnessed. Lena's cheeks were warm, a mix of relief and happiness. "Dad," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head. "No," he said, smiling. "You did it all yourself. I just reminded you how strong you already were." For the first time in weeks, Lena didn't feel small. She didn't feel like a nobody. She felt like she belonged, like she had a place where she could shine without apology.